might be asking, is there such a thing as the one for me? Just one. What do you do when it seems like you have a choice? Or perhaps you found looking too hard and said to God, you know what, God, you can just go ahead and bring the one when you're ready. I'm Gabriel Chan, and welcome to Embracing the Challenge, where we're looking at finding love and building relationships. With me today are Nyasha, Kwabena, and Tukiya. Thank you so much for joining me here today on the show. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourselves?
Yes, so I'm Nyasha. I'm a Bible school student, and I'm also a qualified occupational therapist.
I'm Kwabena. I'm a graduate from the Bible school at Kensington Temple, and I'm currently a graphic designer and video editor.
I'm Tukiya. I'm a project officer in a health organisation, and I go to Kensington Temple Church with these lovely people.
Great to have you here with us. Now, we're here talking today about the whole subject of singleness and progressing towards marriage and asking the question, is there one for me? Now, I don't know about you. Have you all been Christians all your lives, or have you only been Christians for a short period of time? How long have you been a Christian?
I was thinking about that earlier, actually, and scarily enough, I think I've been a Christian for 10 years.
Wow.
It's a long time.
And Kwabs, you've grown up in the church.
Yeah, I've grown up in the church, but being a Christian, following Christ personally, it's been something also from a young age, probably around 8.
So I've grown up in the church, but I think I started taking my walk very seriously with God about 4 or 5 years ago, yeah.
Now, the reason I'm asking that question is there are very different attitudes that we can have towards dating, courting, even finding the one within a church context. They're very sharply contrasted with the way that people do dating and so on now, you know, with all of the potential for dating apps, a lot less intentionality around finding the one, rather finding great experiences and great people to meet for short periods of time. And so there's this sharp contrast in different types of culture. Can I just ask you, do you believe in dating? Do you believe in courting? What's your kind of perspective?
I believe in dating, but what I would say is intentional dating. So dating with a purpose in mind.
Okay.
I don't agree, or I don't practice just dating for the sake of casual dating. I think it should be purposeful and intentional.
Sure.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think there's a intentionality that needs to exist with it. And I think that's kind of what's bred the idea of courting, where people have a negative idea of what dating may be. And so they think that with this courting concept, that will then lead to something where there's a setup that's making an intentional progression towards marriage. And I can see the thinking behind it. I agree with both. I think the key thing there is primarily looking at who you are in that moment and what you are offering to the other person, and not just what does the other person offer me.
And you, Nyasha, what do you think about dating versus courting?
Well, I think I'm in the same boat as these guys, so I definitely wouldn't just date for the fun of it. And that was even before I was a Christian, before I knew about healthy relationships and God's way. I was just the sort of person who was a bit more serious. So if I'm going to date someone, then actually you need to start off with some of the qualities that I might be looking for in a spouse in the future. And so if I'm just doing it willy-nilly, I'm not really going to find the one if I'm doing it like that. So more intentional. Courtship for me has always been something more serious. So like it's just like almost the next stage of dating, rather than we start off a courtship, you're moving along, you progress, you're more intentional, you're very serious about each other, and you're courting because you're working towards marriage, rather than sort of starting at that point and then carrying on in that strange way.
Yeah, and I like what you've done there, because there are different perspectives on what dating is and what courting is. And maybe just to give you a bit of insight, there's a whole culture that sits around this idea of courting. Courting in its extreme involves the whole series of decisions in moving towards a relationship. Where courting has been practiced in its fullest sense, it's at the point where if you liked someone, you would go to their mum or dad to ask them if you could just begin to date. And Nyasha, you were joking before saying, well, your dad would always say no if that were the case. But you start there and you start with almost like an interview. And often dads will be like, let me see your CV, let me see your proof of funds, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it places way too much emphasis on knowing someone is the one before you've even actually got to know them. Dating as well has its own definitions. We talked earlier about the idea of modern dating, where people are looking to meet and find someone not with necessarily the intention of marriage, just with the intention of relationship and some of the benefits that bring. And we're just thinking about what could dating look like. And I like what you're bringing about intentionality, but I also think we have to keep in there the element of mystery and uncertainty.
Yeah.
You know, building a relationship is risky. Choosing to spend time with someone, even spend life with someone, is risky. And there are some relationships that might work out, and that's great. But the reality is some relationships might not. And sometimes we're afraid of the painful experiences, and so we don't even begin the risk in the journey. Now, there's a lot of spiritual talk around the whole idea of finding the one, and I wanted to just focus in for us. Who do you think it is that finds your partner? Is it God? Is it you? Is it your family? Who is it that is going to find your partner for you?
Oh, gosh.
So I think like we were having a discussion earlier, and just thinking about, is it God, is it family, is it you? I am in a place where I think it's actually a mixture. So when I think about, is it my family, I'm not to say that they would find me one, because I only pray that they wouldn't find me one. I'm not sure what would come out there. But you know, I have been raised within a family, and I have been raised with certain values and principles, and you know, I know what's acceptable to my parents, I know what's not, I know what I like of what I've seen and what I don't like, and so my family would frame what would have an influence in that way. Me, well, you know, I'm the one who's going to essentially make the choice. So with all of my experience and all of my background, and probably a lot of baggage from, you know, not just romantic relationships, but maybe friendships that haven't gone so well, you know, you make your choices there. And I would hope that God would be involved in my choice because he, you know, he is God, and I want him to be involved. And if I am truly living my life in line with his will and understanding what he wants for me, then he's going to have a say in that, because, you know, I'm.
And I like what you were saying there. Bring together three very vital parts: our own decision, our family, and really the support structure we have around us, and of course God. Have you ever heard someone that said, you know what, I need to get a word from God as to whether this person's one, or perhaps someone has said to you, you know, you need to hear from God before you start this relationship? And what have you thought about that?
It's a lot of pressure. I think it's definitely a lot of pressure. I agree with taking a step back to actually pray about a relationship, and especially when you're in that moment when you just need a bit of clarity or you need confirmation. But I think it's just purely just taking it at one individual and saying, okay, I'm not going to make any progress, or I'm not going to, I need one particular word to say that this person is my one, this is my husband. I think it's very intense. It's a lot of pressure. It's very intense. And I think for me personally, I'm trying to treat my relationships, my romantic life, the same way I do with something else that I really value, like work. So I'll wait for God to try and give me some instruction as to hold off, wait, tell this person about it. So that I think it's step by step. You make those.
I mean, sometimes it is the case that people want to know what God thinks about something, almost as something like a safety blanket. And do you think that that's sometimes true, Kwabs?
I think so. I think there is that idea that this is something of such great significance, and therefore you want God's approval, you want his insight, and therefore people position this as something where if God hasn't said it, I'm not doing it. The problem there is that it then leads to passiveness in terms of your relationships, and I don't think that passiveness is what God desires from us, although he definitely desires for us to inquire with him. seek out the appropriate steps to take, but I don't necessarily align with the idea that, yeah, I just need a word from God, audible voice. Some people go that far, that they want to hear it, like.
Yeah, and I think what's so fascinating about that is that, you know, we choose a lot of things in life. We choose what kind of phone we want. Yeah. We choose what kind of place we work at. We choose the people that we want to hang out with. And then we come to this space of relationship and we're kind of like, we don't want to make a choice. God, you've got to make that choice. And I think that God wants to empower us to make the choice. He wants to hear what our part is and our role is in this, because then we can really begin to walk by faith. Mm-hmm. If we're wanting God to tell us the future before the present has even started, what does the faith walk look like? What does it look like to journey through good times and then bad times, the green pastures and then the valley of the shadow of death? What does it look like to trust God in those circumstances? We can only do that when we go on the journey with him and go by faith. And I think that that's the line that I would hold up with in terms of spirituality, of building a relationship. Building a relationship is deeply spiritual, but it's found in the day-to-day decisions. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's not knowing the future before it happens, it's knowing now what is going to happen. Now, in terms of finding the one, you know, sometimes we can also fall into a little bit of a trap. You know, we take who we want and we try and force fit them into the mold. Have any of you ever experienced anything like that? I think, Tukiya, you were mentioning a story before.
Yeah, oh gosh, yeah, I've done that and I've learned from it big time. So I had a friend, a really good friend, and we started going out and the big thing though, he wasn't Christian, and I really wanted him to be Christian, but from it's a selfish desire, right? I wanted him to be Christian so that he could fit into this mold of the ideal man that I needed and that I wanted. Lovingly, like, he went along with me to all these different places. When I say places, I mean different churches. So
you took him from church to church?
I took him from church to church. We tried a Ghanaian church. We tried a Nigerian church. We tried a Spanish church. We tried a Baptist. We tried Pentecostal. And you know what? He had a lot of patience with me. he had a lot of patience, and I think, but. Like, I can laugh now, but it does cause frustration and tension at the time. And actually, number one, if I wanted him to come to Christ, he needs to do it for himself, not for me. And number two as well, like, if he had just bent to my rules and just we'd gone into marriage like that, it wouldn't have been good, I don't think. So yeah, I really tried to fit him into that mold, and I would never do that again and never encourage that either, because that's not right, no.
Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes we hear about this idea of flirting to convert, and
yeah.
You know, it's so important to start a relationship with someone who is on the same footing. It's if you thought about it like this: if one were a football team supporter in one direction and another supported a different football team, how would it be in the home? You'd be arguing all the time. And similarly, when you think about faith, it's so important to be fighting for God together and living under God's purpose and plan together. And you know, there are examples in other areas where people try to force fit someone into being the one. I've known relationships where they were just dating and they're calling each other rib of my rib, my wife, my husband. And I'm just sitting there saying, can you just sanctify marriage for a moment, please? Yeah. When you've got a ring on it, when you've committed to each other, then you can call each other husband and wife. But let's keep that relationship special. You're going way too far. You're not even engaged yet. And I think that it's so important for us to think through those kinds of things. How are we trying to force someone to be the one, or is the relationship progressing naturally and normally? Well, how would you think about going about discovering if someone is the one then, if we're working within this process where God is important, our choice is important, our family and friends are important? How would you go about discovering if someone's the one?
I think it's almost like everything else in life, really, isn't it? So you want to put yourself in a position where you can, and this sounds awful because of sort of the connotations, but you can try it before you understand that that's what you want. So, you know, you might become friends, you know, kind of hang out in groups of people, do things together and find out if actually they are the sort of person that you'd actually just want to hang out with, number one, because, you know, if you're dating them, you're going to... Yeah, you'd love to be friends. If you're dating, you're going to hang out a lot. And just get to know them as a person before you start to pursue the line of dating, I think, is sort of a base level starting point.
I was just going to add on to that with the idea of being friends first. The great thing is accountability as well, because, you know, my friends know me well, and if you can hang out with my friends, that's great. But also just the idea about me being able to open up into my friend about this person. They provide another perspective, especially when you're in that first dating stage. You're like, oh, I love this about the person, I love that about him. But actually taking a step back and having someone else that you're kind of accountable to, that kind of, you know, just reaffirms what you were looking for originally in a man or woman, and are they meeting that?
And I think that that's very important as a new perspective of looking at relationships. I mean, if you think about things from a worldly perspective, really one of the huge narratives out there, it's not everybody, but the huge narrative is, you know, are you sexually attractive? And people coming together for the purpose of sex, and that being almost among the first expectations of starting a relationship. And if you just take a step back from the physical physical connection, there are so many other ways to build a relationship. There's, as we talked about, the idea of spirituality and coming from the same perspective there, being friends, having fun together, connecting emotionally. How important do you think that vision and direction is for a relationship?
I think that's so important because being able to work from the same perspective will help you to keep moving forward a long way down the line, because looks change, body types change, all these different kinds of things change, and of course, actually, the mind changes, the way we see life changes, but you want that to be something that's growing when you're in that relationship. And if you aren't able to discern whether you can grow with this person as a person, and you also serving them to grow, then it's not going to work.
And I hear you. I mean, I think that it's so important to know that we're moving in the same direction. And in that context and building the relationship, I think that marriage and intimacy physically is a crowning piece. It's something that sits on a relationship that's been built up and established in different ways over a period of time. And it's very much a gift that we give to each other in that context. Because, I mean, if you're not physically attracted to the person you want to spend your life with, well, that's something you've got to work on as well. But I've, over the years, thought a little bit about a process for figuring out if someone is the one or not. We've talked about the kind of support structures we have and so on. But I kind of call this system a flag system. You know, we all know green, red and yellow flags.
Yeah.
And what I love about the system is it's something that works between you as a couple. It's not set by some objective standards. It's your dynamic and how you're relating with one another. And green flags are stuff that's common. It's stuff that you love about each other, you celebrate about each other, whether it's dinners together or going out doing some sport together or going to special places together. It's stuff that really synchronizes between the two of you. The yellow flag stuff is stuff that's, you know, that sets me on edge a bit, but I can live with it. Or I can even grow to champion it at some point. But red stuff is stuff that we really should pay attention to, red flags. Issues of trust, issues of jealousy, issues of disappearing and not being in touch for a long time. You know, those kind of things are concerning when you're thinking about building a lifelong relationship. My pastor told me when I was thinking about getting engaged, he said, you know what? You need to prepare yourself to give each other a lot more grace, because when you get engaged, it suddenly becomes real. You're no longer just playing boyfriend, girlfriend. You're really asking yourself, do you want to get married to this person? And suddenly you're like, oh my God, that annoys me about you so much. And if it amplifies the engagement, it amplifies even more when we get married. I think it's so important to remember grace towards one another as we get more serious, but also to pay attention to those warning signs. So can I ask you, are there any things that you already know would be red flags for you in a relationship?
I think things relating to relational boundaries. We need to have a clarity of where we stand with each other primarily. Actually, where we stand with God first, and then where we stand with each other, and then understanding what are the boundaries that we have in terms of our friendships, family, the areas that they can contribute or we contribute, and if there are infringements, differences in ideas of how family can relate, I think that can get to a stage where it would be a red flag.
I would say with red flags, selfishness. Sorry, I think that's a big red flag for me. Someone who's selfish, again, ghosting, like you said, disappearing. Like that's a big red flag. If someone is just ghosting for long periods of time when you're dating or you're in that engagement kind of phase, it just makes me think that you're not very good at communicating, and that's a big thing in marriage, I think. And then a massive red flag, I guess, would be purposes of the vision not aligning, the vision that you have for what you want to do in life, but also how you see the vision for the kingdom of God and what you think your role is in that. I think if we're not aligning on that fundamentally, then yeah, that's a big red flag for me.
I think what came to mind straight away was when I was in a relationship, and actually they didn't respect my feelings or try to understand my feelings, and that was a place where I then made lots of compromises and made excuses for them and thought, oh no, it's because, and oh no, it's because, and actually they allowed that to happen because it suited them. So it was kind of, they were a bit selfish, and I didn't set my boundaries very well in that place as well. But that would be my red flag.
Now, I want to introduce a bit of a controversial one before asking a question. You know, sometimes we're a bit afraid of confrontation, arguments. You know, I would even want to go so far as to suggest that you shouldn't think about someone being the one until you've had a real good argument. And the reason I say that is because when you've learned how to disagree and make up, you really are setting yourself up for a healthy relationship. And if you were to think about red flags, someone might say, you know, I don't want us to be an arguing family. Well, that's how you figure out how you really connect and hopefully learn to fight fair and do reconciliation well together. Yeah. Now, let me ask you a question. Do any of you have a list of what you're looking for with regard to a partner? And do you see that list as something that you're going to hold on to no matter what, or are you willing to be flexible on it?
I've never really put together a list. I've seen this happen before. And it's something that I often think about in terms of what features this person will have, both physical and non-physical. And I often drifted away from wanting to do that because I only realized that I didn't really know what I wanted. So I found that I didn't align with that. And down the line, as I've gotten to know myself and as I've understood myself better, I think it's then given me a bit more room to think a bit more critically about what I would be offering another person, and how, if there was somebody as well, what they'd be offering me or how they'd be growing with me, enabling me, and vice versa.
Yeah. Go on, Nick.
I was going to say, I like the last bit of what you said, growing and getting to know yourself. It's very unpopular because I've heard it all throughout my Christian life is make a list. You know, make a list and let God know what you'd like in a husband. No, I don't want to give God a wish list. I actually feel it's really limiting because it's usually based on your selfish desires. You haven't really thought about what you want, and you haven't actually allowed God to have a say in, okay, so I know what you need. I know the type of person that you are. I know how you work, and I really know it's going to be good for you. So let's have a discussion. Let's talk about what's good. And so the piece about getting to know each other, or know yourself rather, I think has been really important for me. So the more that I've got to know myself within relationship with God, the more I can then say, okay, actually, these are the sorts of things that I would like or not like, and know either way, and then think about framing that in a person that I might want to date or get to know.
Yeah, I agree with both of them slightly. So with lists, my list is not really informed by a lot of physical attributes. It's more characteristics. And I think that over time, I couldn't have just sat down one day and just done the list. It was over time God showed me some of the characteristics that I appreciate in men that I've seen, and then in the church, men that have been my friends. I'm like, oh wow, okay, I really like that leadership quality. I want that on my list. Or just the ability to be very peaceful, or to take ownership around praying and guiding, things like that. And the big thing when I was creating this sort of list, and I was talking to Nyasha about it a while ago, was sometimes in past situations where it didn't quite work out, I thought I would end up with that guy romantically, but we were just friends. Instead of looking at that as a rejection, it was like, well, why was he in my life at that moment in time? What did I like about him? And actually that kind of went into my list. So I feel like God positions and puts people in your life at certain times, and that helps inform.
I think that's so powerful is, like you're saying, learning who we are with God in our relationships that we do have. And the list, you know what, some things come in seed form, some things are fully matured. When I was praying to God about finding the one, I had this list, and one day God rebuked me. He said, you know what, that list is just you, but you're looking for it in a woman. Wow. And the moment I laid down the list of qualities that I was seeking for, my eyes fell upon Rebecca. And she has all of the qualities I was looking for, but they were in seed form. And we've been together journeying through her flourishing and growing in those different things. And I think that having all of these different aspects we talked about, the information of our peer groups and the people we look to, the kinds of things we're looking for, the developing and building of the relationship, they all give us a background to make a powerful choice. And I think we need to understand that God is behind us making that choice. He knows all about us and the ways that we're going to respond in situations. And he is the one that empowers us to say yes, because we're going to need to remember that we made that choice when we're going through difficult times. Is the one for us? Well, let me say this. When you say, I do, whatever that person might have been before, they become the one for you. They become the one that you then look to build a lifelong committed relationship with. And being invested in making that relationship works flows out of the fact that we made a choice before the living God. Well, thanks so much for joining us here today as we've talked about discovering the one, going through the challenges and trials of relationship, figuring out how we can come together in compatibility. Your stories have been so vital for this journey. And thank you out there if you've been asking yourself how you can discover the one. Remember, relationship takes risk, it takes a little bit of exploration, and you'll need to exercise some wisdom from God, as it is a powerful choice. Do what you can do and let God do what only he can do. If you want to find out more about some of the systems we were talking about, do check out the website. We look forward to seeing you here next time on Embracing the Challenge. God bless you.